Welcome in to another Running with the Timberwolves podcast on the Believe Sports Network. My name is Gabe Anderson, and we have a very special guest today, writer for ZoneCoverage.com and Canis Hoopus. We have Charlie Walton. Charlie, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're one of my favorite people on Twitter for Wolves knowledge, Wolves insights, and I love reading your articles as well. Why don't you tell them what's your Twitter handle so they can go follow you?
Charlie Walton MN.
Absolutely. And you can check them out on Canis Hoopus and ZoneCoverage.com as well. Well, we have a lot to talk about today as the Minnesota Timberwolves are going really into the home stretch of the season. And I want to talk about your last article that you wrote, talk about that a little bit. You were talking about Jaden McDaniels a little bit and how good he's been over the past couple games. And again, you can read this at zonecoverage.com. But what do you think has gotten into Jaden McDaniels? What has allowed him to be such a contributor, not only on the defensive end, but now on the offensive end?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it just goes back to he's just playing bigger. It's really quite as simple as that. I think it's, for Jaden, his game is really driven on confidence. And early in the season, I wrote an article about how I thought he was an offensive liability. He was shooting around, I think, 33% from three, 30% on open threes, or wide open threes when the defender's, 6+ feet away. And he wasn't really engaged in the offense, and it just didn't look good. And the offense team wide didn't look good. But now he's starting to play into that 6'10" frame. He's attacking the rim. He's been the Wolves' best offensive rebounder for most of the season. I think that's kind of blossomed, like I said, that confidence with him. I think before the season, I think the Wolves kind of envisioned this from him. When you part ways with Cat, there's more shot attempts to go around. And, this, like I said, the start of the season just wasn't good. But then he like I said, he's blossomed into this player that I think they expected him to be. And he's, for the long term too. So.
Guys, the NBA season is in full swing, and what better way to enhance your game day watching experience than with Underdog Fantasy? It's super easy to play. It's as simple as picking higher or lower on players' stats. For example, I'm going to go lower on 23.5 points for LeBron James and Miles Bridges tonight. You can win payouts from everything from the NBA, college basketball, and even the Four Nations Cup. You play fantasy sports anyway, why not get paid for it? Minnesota is an eligible state, as you can see on the map on screen. Use our promo code TWolves and use the link in the description and get a free pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. That's a free pick just for signing up. Again, that's promo code TWolves and use the link in the description when you sign up. And thanks to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the video. Yeah, no, he has been great. A couple stats here. Averaged in his last 10 games, 15.8 points, 7.2 rebounds, and 2 assists in his last 10 games while shooting 49% from the floor. I mean, he's just been what we needed him to be. Now, there were always comparisons, and we always talk about it on this show, can he be the Pippen to Anthony Edwards Jordan? Now, right. I don't know if realistically that was ever going to be the way that things were going to go. I don't know if he was ever going to be that talented as a certified Pippen, but how do you think that he can keep it going, particularly when a ball-heavy guy like Randall or DiVincenzo putting up shot? How do you think he can keep it going when we get our guys back?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, certainly some of his, offensive success is just been there's more shots available, right? Dante and Julius, they combine for around 25 attempts per game. But the beauty of Jaden's game is he's really not like a polarizing scorer. He doesn't need to be the one bringing the ball up in transition. He isn't going to give you like these 15-point quarters. Instead, I like to think of his offense, it's consistent. It's like a drum beat. He'll give you 8 points a quarter, 5 points a quarter. And at the end of the game, you'll look up and, he's the leading scorer. That's happened quite a bit over these last 3 weeks. Like I mentioned, he's playing bigger, and that's what he's needed to do all season long. And once Dante and Julius come back, specifically Julius, like you mentioned, he doesn't need to be giving them 15 points a game, but he certainly needs to be that secondary, that third option scorer. As I mentioned, I think that was the goal coming into this season, from the team, is that he can blossom into this type of player. So it's been a lot of fun to watch him play like this. Like I said, like you mentioned, it probably won't ever be that Pippen player, but I mean, these last 3 weeks, he put up 27 in Dallas, last month, and then he puts up 30 against the Blazers, and then it's 21 against the Thunder, right? And so he's doing this all consistently. The other point I wanted to mention with him too is he's not doing it while he's taking, like, every game that he's had a big scoring night, he's gone 1 for 6 from 3, 1 for 5 from 3. Like, he's doing all of his all of his damage in the mid range at 3-point line, or inside the 3-point line at the rim, right? And I think there's something sustainable to that, right? Where he's not living and dying by that 3-point shot, which I don't think's ever really suited his game well.
Yeah, I agree. He doesn't really fit the archetype, or he fits body-wise, he fits the archetype of a 3-and-D. That's kind of what you want. But the way he plays doesn't really form into that. It's kind of weird how he scores sometimes. It seems like he's taking like the most difficult, like backwards leaner kind of shot, and then he's able to get it to go. His offense is super strange. What I worry about a little bit is, like you said, just the ball dominance of Julius Randle when he comes back, and I worry about that with the Wolves offense as a whole. Just with the ball in his hand so much, I worry that he sinks back into the 3-and-D guy where he's not looking to be as aggressive because the paint is kind of shrinking up with Julius and Rudy Gobert in there, but. I don't know. I hope you're right. I hope he continues to play well, because if we can just get, like we're mentioning, 12 and like 5 from Jaden on a consistent basis, then we're golden.
Right. And I think too, with, the concern, I think it's valid, right? Julius, like, he is a polarizing player. He needs the ball in his hands a lot. He is around the rim a lot, in the paint, in the mid range. But I think, like I mentioned, the fact that Jaden's energy is just never ending, I think it's a good remedy for that, right? He's always on the glass. He's getting those putbacks, which it's great confidence booster when you're doing that, especially when the coaching staff was getting on him for not rebounding early in the year. And I also think it's on Finch to keep him involved. You have to. He's said multiple times that Jaden's the barometer for this offense, and he's also, Finch has struggled to find meaningful ways to get Jaden involved consistently. Like I totally agree. He can't fall back into that 3-and-D, that typical just spot him up in the corner. You got to get him off ball screens, put the ball in his hands, pick and roll, the whole thing. He's just got to be more involved in the offense.
Yeah, so let's shift gears here to your other article that I thought was great. You can check it out at zonecoverage.com. You wrote an article about Anthony Edwards' recent comments about not necessarily wanting to be the face of the league. Now, obviously, it's hard to barometer face of the league, because you look at it and it's like, okay, for years it's been Curry and it's been LeBron and kind of Giannis a little bit, but it's really been Curry and LeBron as the two faces of the league. Do you think if he keeps playing the way that he has been recently, particularly with, it's the new NBA, it's putting up threes, and like we were mentioning, nobody in the NBA has made more 3-pointers than Anthony Edwards this year, which I think is just insane when you think of a world with Curry, like I was mentioning, and just the new way everyone's playing. Do you think that him being the face of the league, whether he wants to or not, is inevitable?
I do think it's inevitable. I mean, on the court, certainly he's captivating. The late game takeovers, the antics. Like with Dylan Brooks, for example, right? Like people eat that up, especially people from Minnesota, because the fans here have been so deprived of it for so long, of a player who's capable of doing this. And then, I mean, like, his charisma, and I wrote about this, his authenticity. He's who he is. And I think that's what he was getting at. He just wants to be himself, and at the end of the day, I think fans can really appreciate that. They see this guy who he's making millions playing basketball, but he's just himself, right? And he wears a gray hoodie and black joggers to a premiere in Hollywood, right? Next to LeBron James, and like, for Netflix's starting five, like it's all cultivating, I think, for him. I would argue, honestly, Gabe, that he already is one of the faces of the NBA? Because like you said,
I
how
would
do you
agree.
how do you how do you say who is like so for like Curry and LeBron, like they're the face of the league and they also have a ton of titles, right? Like they've won
Right,
championships. Same with Giannis. So it's like
right.
for Anthony Edwards to be in a mid market doing what he's doing, and like I said, I would say he is already one of the faces of the league. If not, he will be soon.
Mhm.
Certainly think it's inevitable. It's just he's box office, man. I mean, the Wolves got a ton of nationally televised games this year, and it's obviously because they made the Western Conference Finals, but it's largely because of Anthony Edwards.
Right. And I love what you say there, where he kind of already is kind of the face of the league, because and I wanted to kind of want to make this comparison. Compare him to a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, right?
Mhm.
On the Indiana Pacers, who went to just as far. Now, maybe the Wolves won a game in the Western Conference Finals, but both of them went to the conference finals. The star level of someone like Tyrese Halliburton versus Anthony Edwards, it's not even comparable. Now, some of that could be Tyrese Halliburton plays in Indiana out in the
Yeah.
cornfields, but
Right.
at the same time, just the star power. And every time Anthony Edwards is on national TV, you hear like Perk or Stephen A. Smith. They're always saying, "Oh, this guy's up next. This guy's Jordan's son," or whatever they're gonna say. So, like I said, I think his stock is just gonna skyrocket, whether he likes it or not.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's partly just his play style too. It's more fun to watch, probably for a lot of fans to watch Anthony Edwards dunk
Mhm.
over Chet Holmgren than it is to watch Tyrese Halliburton.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely I think it's like I said, like I mentioned, I think it's really cool that Ant's doing this in Minnesota. I also like imagine if he was playing on the Lakers or on the Knicks. Like
Yeah.
he would probably be the most talked about player, like one of the most talked about players in the league, up there with
Oh
like a
yeah.
LeBron and Curry, just because he's on such a big market. And then I draw
Mhm.
comparisons to Giannis, right? And how he's been able to be such a popular player, so dominant, bring success to Milwaukee, who's Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee is even a smaller market than Minneapolis,
Yep.
so
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's what a treasure that the Wolves have had. Because like we were talking about before we went on the air, just the Wolves have had just years of garbage.
mhm.
Just absolute garbage. And guys coming in for 1 year, oh, he's the savior of the franchise. We have Jimmy Butler. Oh, he's going to take us to new places.
Yep.
And then he gets with the second string, tells us to F off, and we get and more years of BS. So
Yep.
it's a beacon of light in the darkness right now for a
Yeah.
Wolves fan. And it's honestly, here's another thing. This is what I love about Anthony Edwards. As long as he's playing, there's a reason to go to every game. I don't
Yeah.
care if you're playing for example, the Trailblazers and half their team is out. I don't care if
Mhm.
you're playing like Shaden Sharp is their best player. You want to go to Target Center to see if Anthony Edwards is going to dunk over somebody.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the same way on the road too. Like I was in Cleveland
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
Wolves
yeah.
game there, February 10th, and the gravity is felt on the road, and I
Mhm,
mean, there was fans crowding the tunnel at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, and a lot of them were Cavs fans, and they were there to see Ant, and it's just,
mhm.
I mean, it's the Wolves haven't had a star like you mentioned forever, and it's everyone's been saying the same thing, but I mean you can't say it enough because it means something. Like
Mhm.
like Minnesota, like it's a mid market, but it's not a big market. And when you get these players, they're a dime a dozen. It's hard to find a face of the NBA type of player, and especially someone that can captivate people as much as Ant can.
Oh yeah, there's an Ant effect, definitely. Like you were mentioning, you were in Cleveland. I was in Phoenix visiting some friends, and just after the game, the amount of Timberwolves jerseys that I saw in the crowd compared to, like, let's say 10 years ago, if I went to
Yeah,
even like a Bucks game 10 years ago,
yeah,
I would say at a random game in Phoenix on a Wednesday night, there were double the amount of Ant jerseys than there would have been 10 years ago Kevin Love jerseys in
yeah, right.
Milwaukee, which is
Hmm.
even closer. I mean, his impact to this franchise is great, which makes you think about the whole Dallas situation of trading their guy in the middle of the night to the
Hmm.
Lakers. Man,
And then the
that
return
whole
they get has one really good game and then gets hurt again.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right, exactly, yeah. Man, I would not want to be a Mavs fan right now. You'd be doom and gloom for sure. Although they did win 4 out of 5 without Anthony Davis. So let's
Yeah.
move forward here. So let's talk about the big question. Let's talk about 2 words, Naz Reid. And the big question that people want to know, do you see Chris Finch having the courage to bench Julius Randle and start Naz when Randle is back? And the other question, do you think that's the right move?
Yeah, well, I definitely do. The starting lineup has looked like really, really good with Naz out there. And I think that comes down to he plays similarly to Cat, and there's familiarity there. And he fills that void of being a spot up shooter who can give you 20 plus a night, be that second option, be the first option, but he doesn't have to have the ball in his hands. And that's really, really helpful for Ant, right? And, Julius can be a guy who he can give you 25 points, right? 9 assists. He could be that player that we saw on Christmas Day in Dallas, right? But he's just going to need the ball in his hands more. It's cut and dry. It's as simple as that. I mean, that's not to say that Julius can't play well in the starting lineup. He certainly has incrementally, but it hasn't been consistent enough. The offense certainly flows better with Naz out there. So if I had a bet, fans might not like to hear this, I would expect Julius to start in his first game back.
I would too. I really think so.
Yeah, just looking at Finch historically, he's been a guy who's he's stuck in his ways for better or for worse, and it can frustrate fans. It has certainly with all the young players who I know we'll talk about more. Fans lobbied for Finch to play the young guys. He finally is forced to, and then they play really good, right? But you also have to remember Finch has got a really good relationship with Julius. He's been very complimentary of his passing, particularly to open 3-point shooters and to Ant. And Finch has also mentioned the chemistry that Ant and Julius have has been growing, and I've noticed that too. But then, at the same time, you have to think about, okay, so their chemistry looks good, but then the team-wide offense doesn't always look good when they're on the court. So that's like a fork in the road, right? So, how do you combat that? And certainly to me, it's like, I think just keeping Naz in the starting lineup, he's honestly played like, an all-star since it's just like he did last year when Cat went down. He's doing the same thing now. And, he's playing with that starting lineup of Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, himself, and then Gobert, which they played a ton last year. There's that familiarity there. And then if you bring Randle off the bench, I think it promotes him to play more like he wants to. He could be that 1A, that point forward. He can play faster with the bench, right? Depending on who's out there with him. So like I said, all things considered, I think Julius will probably start when he comes back. Although I did say that if Finch were to bench Julius, it would happen after the deadline. But we also haven't seen too much of that new starting lineup either. So I think that would probably factor into Finch's decision as well. So
and they were starting to hit their stride right before the injuries happened. DiVincenzo was playing better. You had Julius Randle was playing much better as well. Like, for example, that Phoenix game, Julius was awesome. Julius was one of the big reasons that the Wolves were able to pull away in that game. And I don't know, it's almost advantageous to have this blessing in disguise, not necessarily blessing, but to have some of these guys go down with injury. So we know what we have with the rest of the team. Like, for example, we had no idea a couple of weeks ago what we had in Jalen Clark.
Yep.
We had no idea what Terrence Shannon was capable of. Now, obviously, it showed some of their flaws as well as young guys in the league. But let me ask you this question. Ranking the 4 young guys right now. So I'm talking Terrence Shannon, Josh Minot, Rob Dillingham, and let's see, who's the other one? Who am I missing?
Jalen Clark.
Jalen Clark, yeah. How much do you trust each of them? 1 through 4. What would you say?
Well, so my number one, and to me, he's on his own pedestal right now. It's Jalen Clark.
Yep.
The defense, he held SGA to 1 of 7 shooting in that game before the All-Star break when he was defending him. His feet move really, really well. His hands are everything's just really connected. He doesn't unnecessarily foul, which is another thing Finch praised him for. And then on offense, he just kind of knows where he's supposed to be, right? He's a really good back cutter. He fills space. We've seen his confidence grow and how much he attacks the rim. He also shot over 40% from 3 in the G League this season, and he's shooting, I think he went 0 for 8 in the last 2 games before the All-Star break, but he's still shooting 39% from deep since he's been inserted into the rotation. So I've seen a lot of fans compare him to Josh Okogie, and I think that's a good comparison. Although I would say that, Jalen's offense hopefully is better than
right.
Josh's.
Also, quick side note here: if you can get a Josh Okogie type player out of a second round pick that we were just who came off an injury
53,
and we were,
wasn't he? I'm pretty sure it's 53rd pick too. Not
50, late second round pick.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get anything out of that, now obviously sometimes you get like a Jokic, right? But if you can get anything out of a late second round pick, sign me up for it.
Yeah, well, and he's been on that two-way deal for now 2 years, so
right.
He's currently on that, and to me, I think you have to get him on a standard deal as soon as possible. Because if this playoff started right now, for those that aren't aware, he couldn't play. These two-way deals aren't eligible for the playoffs. You could sit on the bench, you could be in street clothes, but you can't be active. And I guess there is a world where Chris Finch goes back to that 8-man rotation. And I know someone's probably watching this and they're booing me right now, but it's possible. And so maybe Jalen Clark's not needed, toward the end of the season. I think you're going to need that defense. You're going to need that, that person who can defend like Jay McDaniels, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Because, aside from him, they don't really have that. And it's just, like I said, he just looks super comfortable out there. So certainly I trust him the most. And then who's your number one?
I am with you, Jalen Clark.
Yeah.
I'm 100% with you. Now, obviously, there was that one game where he missed, I forget what game was it. I think it was the Bucks game where he missed 3 open layups.
Yeah.
But I chalk that up to second year, just dumb mistakes like that. That's what I
just bad luck too. I mean,
bad luck. I think Jalen Clark, which we did not see coming. I think that we've had the biggest sample size of him other than a Rob Dillingham who's had more, but I don't know. I think just consistently on a night-to-night basis, I definitely trust Jalen Clark the most, mainly because Rob Dillingham, I worry about his size sometimes, and I worry about him being kind of a streaky shooter. And that's where I think the trust comes in. Like there's games like that game where he broke out against Boston, where he's scoring 15 points in 10 minutes and being like a Lou Williams type of player. But then there's other games where it feels like he's rushing his shot. It feels like his feet are moving too fast for his mind to catch up. And that's why I would put Jalen Clark 1. Who would you put it 2?
Yeah, I would put Rob Dillingham at 2. I think those are valid. Those are valid, criticisms, and criticism. I think honestly, it's just him trying to figure out what he's supposed to do on this team. It's not every day the 8th pick goes to a team that went to the Western Conference Finals, and I've been, I think he's at his best when the ball's moving and he's prioritizing that side of things, not so much looking for his shot. Even though I think Chris Finch said the opposite earlier when he was getting minutes, he was saying that we need, Rob to look for a shot more, but I think the Wolves really do need him to be because Dante is so much better when he's a 2 guard. And I understand that Chris Finch has him starting over Mike Conley or had him starting over Mike Conley, but to have a player who's a natural point guard, and it's like, Gabe, we've been saying the same thing for 2 years now. We said the same thing at the deadline last year before the Wolves traded for Monte Morris. So to have a natural point guard out there, the Wolves, they look like a different team at times when they have that.
100%.
So I think, and I also think too, the reason the trust level is higher is for him is that like you said, he's had the biggest sample size. He's done this on big stages at TD Garden, right? And then he stepped up in that Memphis game, the first, I think it was the first or second game without, Dante. And he's gone through his growing pains, but I think overall he's been really, really good since that injury. And the fact that too, he was coming off of an injury before, like he was only active, I think, for a couple games, and then Dante goes down. It's like, hey man, you haven't really played all year. But you're now going to be a huge part of our team. So you have to give him big props too there.
Right. And it was the same thing. We kept saying on the podcast over and over, fans are like, oh, you got to play Dillingham. You got to play Dillingham. And I kept saying to Chris Finch, someone is going to go down. Okay. He is going to get his shot. These young guys are going to get their shot. The Wolves had such good injury luck at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. Now it's kind of spiraling now. Yeah. Excuse me. But they had such good luck. You knew that something was going to fall. Something is going to go the wrong way, and these guys are going to get a shot. Where would you put Terrence Shannon or Minot? Where would you put?
So higher? Small sample size, but I would put Shannon next.
I agree.
you know, it just he's been locked in on defense. That's been the big thing, and then he's pushing the pace, which has been so needed in the absence of Julius Randle, right? And the passing has really surprised me quite a bit. Just again, he's like almost a year older than Ant, you know, and he's playing like that age. He's playing like a veteran. He's bringing that energy that the Wolves really need. You know, and you mentioned Josh Mina. I also was thinking about Luka Garza for that fourth spot, and I think both players, it's similar. It's the defense that comes down to why, you know, at least why I'm slating them last. It's, you know, Luka Garza against the Bulls a couple weeks ago. I mean, he was just targeted, and it's like if you go to a game at Target Center and, you know, go early, go watch him warm up, or during the game even, like you'll notice Luka Garza isn't a particularly big center, and especially when he was playing against OKC, he was defending, you know, he was standing by Chet Holmgren, like he's, you know, he's small. The defense still has a ways to go, and he works his tail off. Like we know that. His dad tweets about it all the time. The offense is, you know, it's been a little inconsistent with Garza lately, but overall, every time he's on the court, he looks really, really good. And like, you know, same thing with Josh Minot. Finch has said it, right? That's why he was bumped out of the rotation, is because he's, you know, he misses he's not locked in on the scheme, which on the defensive scheme, which I think Rob Dillingham has done a really good job of, is he knows where he's supposed to be. And, you know, like the key to Chris Finch's heart's just like Tom Thibodeau, you got to be able to play defense. He even said that he's like, unless the player is really gifted offensively, more gifted than Rob Dillingham offensively, you have to prove your worth on defense. So,
and I think it's fun. You were mentioning Josh Minot not being locked in defensively. I remember we were watching, because like I said, we went to that Phoenix game, and he went into the game. It was like, I think it was the second quarter. He went in for a shift. He got beat on a back cut. He got beat on a back cut. And he literally went out of the game right after that. I don't think he played an offensive possession. And I heard some audio from Ant after the game. He's like, yeah, Finch tore us up before the game, talking about defensive schemes. And I wonder if that was the moment where Finch was like, I can't trust this guy, because games after that, he barely played. Even when like the team was down, or even that Portland game, he barely played at all. I think it is with Chris Finch. I think, like you mentioned, I think it is the little things, and particularly on the defensive end. I think if you, like, for example, he's like, we're talking about Jalen Clark. He's not going to bench Jalen Clark because he missed a couple layups. But if Jalen Clark lets up a couple back cuts, or it's a wide open dunk or something like that, then 100%. I think Chris Finch could give up on Jalen Clark. So I don't know. I think it's just an accountability thing on the defense.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's tough too for those young guys. I mean, you come in and defensively, you should just be able to be like, that's why I think Terrence Shannon Jr. has really impressed me a lot. Same with Jalen Clark. Obviously, you have to come in, you have to lock in on defense right away. Like you said, the offensive leash is a little longer, but it's got to be tough, I would imagine, if you're sitting there on the bench, you finally get a chance and you make one mistake and Finch is like, you're out. You know, and I mean, that's how it is. That's how the NBA is, right? Like this isn't the, you know, the Washington Wizards. You're not going to be out there.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, I remember Kyle Teggy was talking with Dane a while ago about how he's like, well, maybe the Wolves should just commit to the youth and not try to win this season. Well, they're still trying to win. Chris Finch, and I mean, this organization, it's obvious they believe that they can win. You know, I think so. That's part of it, right? You're not going to have that leash to work through the growing pains. So,
right, and also to that point, I mean, we're a second apron team. We're trying to win right now. Like, and I get it. Like, let Randall get mad, let him leave, whatever. But like, when you're one of the highest, excuse me, when you're one of the highest cap teams in the entire league, you're trying to win, or at least you should be. Right. Which brings in the whole Phoenix situation, which that's a whole mess. Which we'll say that for a little bit. So let's get into our last topic here.
Yeah, man.
The big news last week that came out, that ARod and Lore came out victorious in the arbitration. So just for Wolves fans, maybe that aren't in the know with the Wolves too much, how big of a deal is this? Like, let's just get this. What was your reaction to ARod and Lore winning arbitration?
Yeah, well, I was actually standing in line at that Cavs game when it got announced. I was kind of like waiting by my phone all day. I went to like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'm like checking. I'm like, all right, what's going on? And like, like
Yeah.
it pushed it to like the last second. But no, I mean, it's huge. And Gabe, you know this. It was a long and really frustrating situation ever since that statement got put out that Glenn Taylor said the team's no longer for sale. My hope, my expectation is this is sort of that breath of fresh air, right? You've got two new, younger owners, much younger than Glenn Taylor. I think I make comparisons to like the Twins when I think about this, because like the Polads are supposedly selling the team, right? And it's like whoever buys that team, like the fans are going to like them right away. I can't remember where I heard that, but it's the same thing with the Wolves, right? Like whoever replaces Glenn Taylor is going to be well liked. And I think ARod and Lore are publicly and PR wise like the perfect ownership group. You've got,
I agree.
You got Laurie's like that financier, and then Finch said, right, ARod's that brings the sex appeal, and there's a presence like with ARod when he's at the games, and it's like there's not a presence when Glenn Taylor's there. And like the egregious example of this is like Steve Ballmer, right? Like the dude just goes nuts. But Wolves fans really seem to like Alex Rodriguez, and Twins fans maybe not. But I noticed before a game a little while ago, he was giving some baseball pointers to a fan pregame at Target Center, and it was just a cool moment. I'm like, I can't imagine being that kid, being like, wow, Alex Rodriguez just top, was like giving me tips. I mean, it's cool. So it's like I said, they seem really well liked amongst the fan base. And I hope that this situation, this is kind of as that final page turner into this new era, right? This new era of Anthony Edwards rising to the face of the league, this new era of deep postseason runs, right? Of sellout crowds, right? Those things aren't attached to Glenn Taylor's tenure with the Wolves, right? So
what's attached to now Glenn Taylor, he did, to his credit, he had opportunities to sell it to someone who wasn't going to keep the Wolves in Minnesota. I think that, honestly, I think that's his legacy, is if nothing else, he kept the team here.
Yep.
I really
that's what I was thinking too. Yeah. I was, speaking about his legacy, I'm like, overall, it's just not good. Because if you think about like on the top of the list, it's the KG thing, right? Not getting his jersey retired. And then the final memory you have with Glenn Taylor as a Wolves fan is he like at the last second was like, hey, I'm gonna go back on my word. This team's not for sale, even though these guys have been here for years, slowly purchasing the team, right? And then it goes into this nasty spiral. I hope on that topic, I really hope that KG can finally get celebrated. At Target Center. I have a story. I mentioned this to people. There was like a report like 3 or 4 years ago, right when ARod and Lore were like coming on board, that they might have interest in bringing KG on board as like
I remember that.
And I aggregated. I just posted that report on Instagram. Didn't say anything. It was just, here's what this report is. I must have tagged KG because he slid into my DMs after, and he to that post he responded all capital, just never. And I was like, man, like it's not my fault. And I'm like, and I was like, okay. And I responded. I was like, oh, come on, KG. The fans love you. It's all I said. He reads the message and then he blocks me. So I don't know if anything's changed since then, but I can definitively say like 3 or 4 years ago when he messaged me, to quote him, never. Like it didn't sound like he wanted anything to do with the team, anything to do with ARod and Marc Lore. Hopefully, like I said, that's changed as they become controlling owners. But yeah, I mean, or even him coming to a game, like not even the jersey thing. Like I'm pretty sure he hasn't been to a game since 2019. Wasn't it when that Prince game when they debuted the jerseys? I'm pretty sure that was the last time he was there. So there's rumblings he was going to be there in the Western Conference Finals, but I mean, nothing came of it. So
well, by the way, that is an awesome story. You got blocked by Kevin Garnett.
Blocked by Kevin Garnett. Yeah,
that's fantastic. But just the fact, and to talk about Glenn's legacy a little bit, freaking Alex Rodriguez, the Twins killer, owns your team, and people love him. Like people love him. That should tell you a little something about the disdain for Glenn Taylor.
Yeah,
like the guy who ended Maurer and Morneau's playoff dreams like 3 or 4 times is now owns the team that's right across the skyway. And people love him. People can't get enough of him.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's that it's the new, he's the new guy. They're the new people. Right. And, I think you wanted to touch on too, like the finance side of things. And
yeah.
But I did have that too, where it's just like, you got to give him credit keeping the team here. And it's kind of sad that, like, I mean, when was that? Like in the 90s, wasn't it? Like it was a long time ago when that happened. It's like, okay, so that's the one good thing you did. And then after that, it's just been like a downward spiral of why the fans don't like you.
Right. The Lynx.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, he's the owner of four-time WNBA championship team.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. We don't give him credit for that. That's a good point.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I think we give more credit to Shale Reeve for that, but Glenn Taylor can get the credit too.
Right. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, Charlie, thanks so much for joining us today. This is Charlie Walton of Canis Hoopus and zonecoverage.com. Go and read his stuff. It's awesome. Any Twitter plugs or website plugs you want to throw in?
Not too much. You can just catch me on Zone Coverage. Canis, not too much this season, but I'm still picking up stuff here and there. Weekly column at Zone Coverage, and then Twitter, just kind of regular coverage there as well. So this has been great, though, man. I really appreciate it. It's been fun chatting with you.
This is awesome. I've been wanting to have you on for a long time. I'm glad this worked out, and we would love to have you on again. Seriously, though, everyone, if you want like in-depth Wolves coverage on Twitter and little bites on you're on Blue Sky as well, right?
Yeah, kind of. Kind of. I've got an account out there. I just haven't had enough time to post there too. So
all right. Well, I'm trying to merge over there as well.
Yeah, me too.
Just don't trust Elon. But anyway, but seriously, if you want like little Wolves bits that you're like, oh, I never noticed that, or check out his Twitter because it's fantastic. It's honestly one of my favorite Twitter accounts covering the Wolves. So
I appreciate that. That means a lot, Gabe.
Absolutely. And this is the Running with the Timberwolves podcast on the Believe Sports Network. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube and give us a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple. And as always, go Wolves.